Welcome to the IMM Friday Flash Talk, anchored by Govan Whittles.
The reason why that responsibility was taken away from the Hawks is not yet known.
With marketing enthusiast Tarasai Moffat.
To have a return on sales, you need to have posts that are going to be engaging.
Brought to you by the Institute of Marketing Management, South Africa. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the IMM Friday Flash Talk. The Institute of Marketing Management presents talks like these where we share insights into the world of marketing, take a look at the latest strategies, and bring you guests, people that are involved in the industry who have special knowledge or know a lot more about where the world of marketing is going. And we're so happy to be back. We kick it off this time with a special presentation of the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer, the South Africa report. This is interesting because it looks at the state of trusting in institutions, be they government, business, the media, or just ordinary people like you and me. My name is Govan Whittles. I'm the host of the IMM Friday Flash Talk. Today we have Busi Roberts. She's the head of health at Edelman Africa, and she'll be going through the report with us. We'll have a conversation about some of the trends that they're picking up, how it's different from 2023, and what it means for business and particularly marketers in South Africa, on the African continent, and abroad. Of course, as always, please do join in the conversation. Feel free to share some of it on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, as most marketers do, even on TikTok, if you have it. But for now, let's get straight into the conversation. Busi, welcome to the IMM Friday Flash Talk. It's such a great pleasure to have you. Why don't you go ahead by starting with a few notes on what Edelman does with the Trust Barometer and what some of the key findings are from the 2024 survey.
Thank you, Gavin, and I'm looking forward to this conversation that we'll be having this morning. As some of you might know, is that the Trust Barometer is Edelman's proprietary. Really, they've been studying trust for 24 years now. This is our 24th report, and the global report was launched at the World Economic Forum earlier on in the year in Davos. And thereafter, we released the market-specific studies, and we're very excited that we are launching the South African Trust Report, which is looking at trust in the institutions in South Africa and what regular people are seeing. And when we're talking about trust, we're talking about how people view the competence of these institutions as well as their ethics. So when we're talking about competence, it's about whether they are able to do what they say they will do, and ethics, in other words, how they are conducting their business. Can they be trusted with that? So that's what we're doing. And as you've mentioned, we study 4 institutions, which is business, government, media, as well as the NGOs. And we ask regular people. So we do surveys with about just over 1,100 respondents in each country, and ensuring that they represent all demographics of that country, from race, from gender, from age group, from socioeconomic status, to ensure it's quite well represented so that we can get the view. And we also include religious beliefs and political affiliate, all of that, so that we've got well representation. So it's not skewed towards a certain, demographic of the country or whatever the case might be. So this study is conducted in 28 countries across the globe with over 32,000 respondents. And it gets conducted between November and December of the previous year. So this is when the survey actually took place. And then the results are then prepared so that we can then release them. And really the purpose why we're doing this is, I think the findings are usually quite informative and assist businesses or institutions to actually formulate their strategies to look, what does this mean for them? And how can they use it to advance their business? So in other words, if the findings are telling you this is what people think and you are headed the wrong way, it gives you actually information, and you can go back to the drawing board and say, how can I utilize this data, these insights that I have to actually fix something in my business? And if the findings are actually supporting what you are currently doing, then you know you're on the right track and you can just strengthen that and do it so much better. So that's really the reason why we do this. And we, give advice and counsel our clients based on this information, depending on what sector they're in and what's their strategy and what they're trying to achieve. So we look forward to sharing this with you.
Awesome. Trust is so important for marketers. Understanding what the level of trust is within the consumer base, but also whether or not there's an alarming trend creeping up. Before we get into the South African report, could you give us some of the highlights of the global report?
Yes, sure. So I think if we look at what's happened in the year, some of the findings are really not surprising if we watch the news on a global scale and see what is happening. So this year's trust really comes following a year of immense and intersecting change. We've seen the conflict in the Middle East. Everyone knows about it. The unlocking of ChatGPT, particularly, really picking up in 2023. Protests against climate mandates on one side and global climate commitments on the other. So there's been a lot of things happening in the world this 2023 towards the time, obviously, this survey was done. And closer to home, we grappled with continued economic pressures. Load shedding kept us in the dark, which you all know, and our business gateways at our ports were taking strain. And looking at this year being an important election coming this year. And the interesting fact is that over 60 countries are actually having national elections this year. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and a lot of things up in the air. And it may have an impact, obviously, in how people are feeling. And we are seeing that in some of those results. So there's a lot of anticipation in our country of a new era. We're hoping, we don't know. So there's a lot of that, and that does come through. So in the 24 years that we've been doing trust, we've seen 4 big things crystallizing. So we've seen the shift from authorities to peers, people trusting their peers a little bit more, people like yourself, you and me and our families. Then we had the mass class divide in trust between the highest earning and lowest earning quartiles of respondents. So we saw that people who, from a socioeconomic standpoint, that's what swayed people to trust or not trust. This was historically. Then we started seeing the battle for truth. And this came around the time of COVID, closer to that time, where there was a lot of mis and disinformation that altered what we can believe. And then the emergence of business as the most trusted institution. This is what we saw trending in the last few years, even last year. That was really a recurring theme in our trust reports. So, and business was trumping over NGOs, over media and government. But this year, we arrived at the 5th major theme, and that is innovation in peril. Not because of the technologies themselves, but how they are integrated into society or not. So that's really what the overarching theme in terms of this year's trust.
Well, what do you mean how they're integrated into society? What exactly are you referring to?
So we know we're talking a lot about innovation. We've seen innovation coming through in terms of, we're talking about ChatGPT and AI, and there's a lot of discussion. Some people are for it, some people are against it, some because there's not enough information. There's lots of questions that are unanswered, that some people are very accepting of it. Some, they can see the use for it, but they are unsure what does it mean for them, for their future. There's a lot of insecurities, etc. So, and things like green energy. Some are still hesitant, but we see with our results that there's a lot more acceptance for green energy than, for example, AI. We are like literally on a crossroad with that, with almost the same number of respondents being for and against. And then also looking at innovation, looking at things like GMOs, gene-modified, foods, etc., which there's a lot of rejection for it, like people are absolutely not accepting because—
In South Africa?
in South Africa. So these are
Well, that's interesting because all of South Africa's food is GMOs.
But people might not necessarily know that. So it talks about perceptions. So it's the perception. If we look at furthermore, as we delve into this, we'll hear people saying, we want scientists to talk to us more. And that's what we're not seeing. So perhaps people have a fear of what they don't know. They don't know that to a great degree, they're already consuming it. You know what I mean? Because there's not those conversations that are taking place. And remember, the regular person doesn't pick up a food item and look at it and look at the ingredients necessarily. So they might be consuming it, but they don't know. But in their minds, they are completely against it. So I agree with you. I mean, we've got a lot of foods that crops that are genetically modified, a lot of our maize, etc., etc. But the regular person doesn't know. And we've actually been doing that for over 20 years already. It's not as recent as some people may think. And then we've also got the emerging gene-based medicine, which is a lot of rejection towards that innovation because people of fear of what they don't know or what they're not being told. And COVID,
you mean it's the mRNA?
Not necessarily just that, but that could be one of them. But there's a lot of what they call pharmacogenetics, where they want to have gene-based, so it's basically precision medicine, where doctors, instead of treating all people with diabetes type 2 with this set of medication, that might actually not be metabolized well enough by your own system due to your genetic makeup, but they actually do genetic testing first before they determine what will work best for you. So, but because anytime they hear the word, genes, and they think about mRNA and those vaccines at the time, based on limited information, they're rejecting it. You know what I mean? So it's all of that. It's not because there's necessarily a problem with the innovation, but it's the lack of knowledge, which therefore breeds distrust and fear.
Okay, those are some of the things that people have certain levels of trust in. But I think what would be interesting to marketers is what the levels of trust are in institutions. So you guys have got percentages, right?
Yeah.
You have specifics around the levels of trust in institutions. This is something I'm very interested in. What is the most trusted institution in South Africa?
It's business.
Still.
It's still business. So that is a continuing and recurring theme, that business is still trusted. And what we've seen come out is, in light of innovation, for the respondents are saying, for innovation to be accepted and adopted into society, business must actually partner with government, because they do acknowledge that government is an enabler. They create the regulatory framework for some of these emerging technologies, emerging innovations. So
business should introduce the innovation to the people,
because they are more trusted. However,
through marketing, I suppose.
Exactly.
So give us some of the percentages in terms of the trust levels.
Yeah, give me
that are in business, and then what would be, I'll take a guess, is it business first, NGO second, then the media, I hope. Yeah, and then the government last. What are the percentage differences?
Okay, I'll give you in just a moment. So when it comes to trust, so business is at 65% trusted by the people that we were interviewed. Then NGOs at 58, and then media at 46. So media is at a level of distrust, because anything below 50% is now in that distrust between 1 and 49%. And then government coming in at a low 36%.
Sure.
So there's quite a big gap.
That is very concerning. So business is at over 60% trust?
Yes, it's at 65. So any score between 60 and 100, that's really a relatively high trust score. And that's exactly where it ranged even last year. But what we're seeing that if we were to now split it according to income levels, our low income, they rated at about 64, and then the high income, it even goes higher at 70%. And now if you look at NGOs, high income groups, they're at 64% trust for NGOs, while low income groups at 56%. Media, 54% low income earners trust media, and 51% of high income, so that you can know exactly where the split is. And then government, with no surprise, they're high income earners. They trust government at 43%, and low income earners at 37%. So it really does show you the state of despondency and, a bit feeling of
Does your barometer say why people trust them that much?
No, not necessarily. So we don't always go into those questions. No, so it's really just some of the questions like, how do you trust this institution versus that one, et cetera, but not so much with the detail of the why.
What is the expectation about how this information can be used?
Well, as I've mentioned, so for us, obviously, as communicators and as a communications agency, we support a lot of our clients within the business, NGO, and of course, we work with media. We're in that space for our clients. So it's very important that we see what are the trends, etc. We don't work so much with government. However, this is, but as a business that's vested in this continent and in this country, it doesn't give us any joy when our government trust is so low. So because we do want a progressive country, we want to see South Africa succeed and the rest of Africa succeed. So we would want government to also have access to this information, you know what I mean, if they would receive it, whoever the government of the day is, because if we can get the government right, then everything else will flow from that. But that's not always in our control. But if we can influence maybe the other three institutions, but then the state of the level of trust in the country holistically just rises up, and it's better for all of us. Because at the end of the day, we are citizens of this country and we want to see progression.
Well, the barometer does indicate that there's a huge amount of responsibility on business to drive that progression. But realistically, how much responsibility should business accept for driving innovation, or the trust in innovation, or the trust in green energy, or even in GMOs? Should we be seeing marketers actively considering that they have a responsibility to improve the trust in these things among the general population because the trust in the government is so low?
Absolutely. I do think business and everybody related to business, being marketers, communicators, etc., we all have that responsibility. And I think this information, what it's telling us is, how are we framing our messages? Are we telling people what they want to know, or are we telling them what we think they should know? So we need to go back to the drawing board and say, especially if you in the field of innovation or energy or whatever the case might be, and these innovations are coming up, if the level of acceptance and adoption is low, we can't keep churning new innovations while not really fully letting the public accept it and really use it for what it's worth. So now with this information, because it's really telling us a lot, when they're saying we want to hear from scientists, we want to hear from the innovators to say, this is how this works, because they trust the technical experts a lot more. So when we have that information, how do we prepare them to simplify their messaging, so to actually put them a little bit more on the spotlight? So it's a question of, who are we putting and replacing as spokespeople for these innovative companies? If it's a typical communicator or maybe the CEO, and if your consumers are saying, I don't really believe the CEO because excuse me, because I don't think he knows a lot about this, but I want to hear the guy who's actually sitting in the lab or sitting wherever. I want to hear from them. So this is information we have that says, all right, for people to adopt this, they want to hear a little bit more. They want a platform where they can ask questions. Because I think the problem, even when we look at the gene-based medicine and the hesitance to adopt it, is there isn't a platform for people to ask questions, to say, but how will it affect this? How will it, because even doctors don't necessarily have that information. So, you know what I mean? So people want that opportunity. So it gives us, you know, if our strategy is conventionally, this is what we do, these are the people we position. If they are not the suitable ones for that specific subject or that specific conversation, we should hear the people out and maybe alter and change a few things for the benefit of all of us.
I guess that we should put more of them in the adverts, use them in the campaigns. But there's always a trade-off between using people in campaigns that are able to reach and resonate, which are usually your peers, which your barometer shows are quite trustworthy, and using technical people who also maintain a certain level of trust. And the consideration when putting a strategy together would be what the trade-off is. I mean, why do companies stand to benefit from having more technical people in their ads, in their campaigns? Is it just that they know for sure that people will trust them more?
Well, you know what? We don't have the answers to that, because I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody to say, all companies in innovation going forward, please use your technical experts. You know what I mean? It won't necessarily work for each one, but it's about looking at this data and looking at these insights and say what is applicable in our environment and in what our offering is and how we engaging with our consumers and all those we want to trust us. You know what I mean? And it's not limited to campaigns and adverts. You know what I mean? So this is a lot broader than just what, of course, the marketing team is doing, but it's really about everybody you are positioning to be a spokesperson at any level. It's not necessarily on television at your 30-second ad and what have you, because that might also come across as a gimmick if it's not really thought through and then it's integrated with what you're trying to achieve. So I don't think people can just look at this and say, oh, I see that scientists are used more, and now have a meeting with your scientists and say, from tomorrow onwards, you are the face of the organization. You know what I mean? It's really taking everything with a pinch of salt and seeing how can you customize it and make it work for your organization and what you're trying to achieve, and taking into account these insights. If your consumers are saying they want to hear a little bit more, what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean produce 30-second ads that now have these people, but it might just mean something different, position them somewhere, you know what I mean? So it just gives us food for thought and how best we can put those in our strategies.
Okay. What are the differences in trust levels between the simpleton, which is like me, the ordinary person, and the scientists, the specialists, the technical people? Do people have an equal level of trust in them? I hope not, because obviously experts are experts. But what are you seeing in terms of the difference?
Well, this actually came out already last year, and at the back of COVID, that people started trusting their peers a lot more, because I think
scientists.
Yeah, and scientists. Yeah, exactly. So now scientists have actually recouped a little bit more in this year's barometer, but they are still lagging behind peers. So peers are still trusted more. Remember what people want to do before they try something new. If before a person goes for, let's make an example of the COVID vaccine, perhaps, they first wanted to see who else went, What was your experience? And they trusted that more than what the Department of Health was saying, or whoever else is campaigning for you to go ahead with vaccine. You're like, no. Did you have any side effects? How did you feel? Was it painful, etc., etc.? So, or even a different example for that matter. So people trust their peers a lot more, but we're seeing that the resurgence of a trust in the scientists and technical experts a lot higher than actually the other institutions or actually other stakeholders. So the role of peers, which I suppose in your marketing world, that's your influencers, your regular people that you use for campaigns that people trust, that can say, I've used this and this is how it's working for me. I mean, we've seen the rise of it, so and there's a good reason for it, because people can identify with the man next door, you know what I mean? So there's a big rise in that. But when it comes to this innovation and how it works and all of that, scientists are seen as a big, trusted people in that regard.
Is that just because of COVID-19, and is it specific to health, or does it extend beyond other sectors?
I think it does extend beyond other sectors, but I mean, that came out a lot stronger during our trust barometers during that period. And remember, things that influence the way people perceive an organization is really also based situational in what's happening at that particular point in time. You know what I mean? So that's why you can't really divorce it with the state of affairs in either that sector or that industry or that country or whatever the case might be. I mean, if you ask people about energy and green energy in 2005, probably there would be a lot less acceptance of it then, because we didn't have the challenges we've all faced as a country. That has brought our trust level so low on the energy sector, but now they've elevated our trust levels on green energy. So it also depends what's happening in the country at that specific time, or the industry, or whatever the case what it is. So you can't really take anything in isolation. So you have to look at it in context.
Does your barometer put scenarios to people in terms of who should be communicating a message, or who should be regulating an industry?
So yes, they would ask questions like, who do you believe should be regulating innovation? You know, because some of the fears that people have is they have fears for, information war, how will this be used, etc., etc.
That AI will hack all of your social media and put your business out there, that your bank accounts will be compromised. Yeah,
absolutely. So they've got all of those fears, and they don't feel that they're being addressed. But some do have an understanding that for any policy or regulatory framework in a country, or specific to, a new innovation, that obviously is government's responsibility through maybe the Department of Science and Technology or whatever is relevant. So they know that government has that responsibility. However, they don't necessarily feel that maybe government has the competence or the full understanding of that specific technology or that specific innovation to create a regulatory framework. Hence, they're saying, business, we trust you. Partner with government to create an enabling environment for these technologies to thrive, for these technologies to actually, positively affect society.
So people want to hear that business is not only presenting something new, but also considering their concerns and protecting them.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So, I mean, we've seen this already last year, where the expectation from businesses and business leader is really increasing, where people saying, my CEO or MD or whoever, they shouldn't just care about this business and just us as employees. They need to care, they need to look wider into societal concerns. So they want actual CEOs, they want to hear your voice on climate change. They want to hear your voice on AI. What are you saying as a CEO? Because one thing we have seen, my CEO came out as one of the trusted leaders in last year's barometer, and it's still coming through even this year. So we're not saying CEOs in general, but people personalize it to my CEO, the one that I'm employed under. I want to hear, what does he say? What does he think about unemployment? What does he think about poverty? So all these other societal issues. So there's that expectation that you can't just worry about the success of your business and how, your world and your employees and your shareholders and all of that is working well. But you need to have a voice and have a point of view in what's happening around you. And that's an expectation from the employees and your people and your communities around you. So yes, there is that expectation that business must do more than just their daily bread.
And it's such a key part of marketing is to be responsive to what's happening around you, to tailor your offering according to the mood of the country. You got to read the room.
Absolutely.
As they say.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is setting the agenda in the room.
Absolutely, yes, and absolutely. You have those opportunities to set the agenda, see what's happening, and see how do you make it relevant for these people that you are influencing. So I think it's really realizing that your sphere of influence is much wider than you thought. It's not just limited to everybody employed in organization X. It's a lot wider, and there's a high expectation from leaders these days, and which sometimes maybe business schools have not even prepared them for that. You know what I mean? Because they thought as long as you making profits and shareholders are happy, your employees are happy, you know what I mean, product or services, meeting the needs of your consumers, etc., etc. You're ticking all the right boxes in terms of your KPIs, etc. But the landscape has shifted. So that needs to look a little bit different.
So you've got those 5 areas which you question people on, right? Mm-hmm. Which is green energy, innovation.
It's for energy. So now this is specifically to innovation in terms of how likely are they to accept or reject this innovation. So
we'll talk about innovation in a second. Just give me some of the percentages in terms of the trust in business across those 4 areas. What are the percentages?
So it wasn't necessarily trust in business, but rather trust in that specific innovation, how they would accept it. So in other words, they trusted. So when we look at green energy, only 14% of the respondents said they rejected, while 57 accepted. Some might not have responded to that question.
It seems like a large percentage of people who are uncertain.
Possibly. Yeah, could be. But AI, it's split in the middle with 33 either way, because some see that they use for it, but they've got more questions. They're not sure if this is really the right way to go, etc., etc. So they're struggling with more recent technologies. They struggle to build enthusiasm for this technology due to the unanswered questions. And then with gene-based medicine, as I've mentioned, that one 47% outright rejected, while 21 accepted. And then GMO foods, which is the most rejected at 64, which, as you've mentioned, it's already, and it's been around for so long in South Africa, but it might be just really perception and not knowing. So GMO food strongly resisted.
Do you have differentiated percentages for high income and low income earners?
No, not in this specific. I don't have that breakdown with me right now on that one.
And I mean, I suppose that if you're running a marketing firm and you're looking at those areas of trust, you may be tempted to just avoid the areas which people have little trust in and try to build your campaign around the areas where there already is a base of trust for you to work off?
I don't think that's always possible. I mean, if your bread and butter is the area that's least trusted, you can't necessarily just abandon it. But now
Yeah, you
it's
got
to
to do
say
something about it.
you have to do something about it. It's now really digging a little bit deeper. Perhaps because obviously this is a general report, we're not necessarily in the field of technology, that's our business, that we would have gone even deeper. But if you are negatively affected by the outcome of this report, then I mean, it should be a starting point, because you can't just abandon what your core business is purely because there's poor acceptance, etc. But it's a question of how then do you dig deeper and understand what is it that causes people to reject this? What is it that they don't understand? What do we need to do? Maybe we need to go on a consumer education drive. We need to have sessions where people can speak, through whatever platforms. So it gives you a starting point to say, probably you would have known already due to from your sales reports, etc., that this is not going as well as we thought, but maybe you didn't have the answers. Now you're getting a little bit of information to say they're not accepting this, whatever. Now you can move forward to the next point to say, let's dig deeper, let's find out why, because it might not be because they don't think
your campaign is bad. Yeah, it's nothing to do with you and your marketing strategy. It's just that there's a low level of trust in the area of focus where your stuff is landing, which makes it usable. And I suppose a lot of marketers will be looking at the trust levels around AI and green energy, where there seems to be a lot of spending in advertising at the moment.
Yeah.
Are the trust levels in AI and green energy improving?
Well, remember now, this was taken at a point in time. So we haven't gone back to go and, and do the survey again to be able to compare it. So I don't have anything to compare it with to say last year, because this did not come out strongly in last year's report at all. So I don't have a... So
people
no, last
talking
year,
about green energy and AI last year.
Yeah, no. Remember, last year's report, the survey was conducted in November of 2022, and we released it in early 2023. And that's really where we started to see the surge in ChatGPT, when 100 million people were recorded to have logged in on one day. You know what I mean? So those things happened post the release of our trust study at the time. So this is why it's probably coming out stronger in this year's report, which was taken late last year.
Is the springing up of new areas of trust measurement common when doing a trust barometer, or do we see people continuously raising the same issues?
No, so I think, as I've mentioned earlier on, that over the last 24 years, we've seen like sort of certain themes coming through. So there's been 5 themes that came through over the 5 years. So some years you saw a little bit of a pattern that, okay, well, there's a lot of similarity in this year's with last year and a little bit of the year before. So hence I mentioned there was a time when, I mean, in a few years ago, that's when the business started coming strong as the most trusted, which was not necessarily the case maybe 5 years or 10 years before that. They were sort of in par with the other institutions or whatever the case might be. But now it started actually just really leaving the blocks and being ahead of the institutions, other institutions, like it was like, gee, what's going on? And so that's something that we then delved in deeper. So in the past, we've seen more of that mass divide in terms of class, the big difference in the trust between the low income and high income, that you couldn't really put them in the same box because they really had different views. But now that's becoming less and less. And, but this year, this is the first time that there's so much coming out in terms of innovation.
Okay. Why is the subheading of this report, which is Edelman 2024 Trust Barometer, the South Africa report says innovation in peril?
Mm-hmm.
Why is innovation in peril?
I think when we're looking at these 4 areas of innovation we've been talking about, and the fact that 2 of them are pretty much outrightly rejected, which is the GMOs and the gene-based medicine, while AI is half-half, with only green energy really a winner, taking those strides. So the question is, as a country in a global, in this global village we live in, can we afford to leave innovation behind? You know what I mean? What happens to us as a country if we leave innovation behind? And therefore the question is, what will it take for society to accept this innovation? Because I think we can all agree we need innovation. Times are changing. Innovation is an answer to a lot of our challenges. Yes, we have structural challenges in the country that maybe they don't need innovation. They just need service to be delivered where it's needed. But putting that aside, we need to be progressing in other areas, and we need innovation. I mean, when we're looking at things like ensuring that we reach universal healthcare coverage by 2030 as part of the SDG goals, etc. And we know we're not going to do it without innovative technologies that are introduced to bridge the gap, in our healthcare system, etc. So if there is so much resistance, and this gene-based medicine is just an example, there could be other innovations in that space that are also rejected, therefore taking us a few years back in terms of progress. So those are the questions. So that's why it's more of like it's not a statement per se to say innovation is in peril. You know what I mean? It's more like really a question. Is it in peril? Is it really doomed, or can we still save the day? What will it take for us to save the day?
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of opportunity to change people's minds, particularly with regards to GMOs, where a debate has been raging on whether the labeling is sufficient, particularly here in South Africa.
Absolutely.
But if you were a marketer, what would you do with this report?
With this report, I would take it, sit with my marketing team and say, right, what is relevant to us? What is it that speaks to us? And say, so really, it really depends what it is that you're doing and what your strategy is. And is it boosting what we were doing? In other words, is it really saying we're on the right track, so let's do more? And if that's the case, let's put efforts behind it and really elevate it and just make it work even better, because we know there's an opportunity, there's low-hanging fruits everywhere that we need to go pick. You understand what I'm saying? So that's what I would do. But if it's showing, listen, what you are doing right now is not going to help you achieve your goal. So you need to reset and look at what you have planned and say, what can we do differently? If your strategy was to use, whoever, certain types of influencers, but this report is telling you nobody believes them, nobody trusts them, you know what I mean? Then review that and say, does this work for this? Maybe it works for product A, but not for product B, because this needs a different strategy. So it lets us look at things and not just apply in one size fits all. And also thinking about, in all that we're doing, have we made room for consumers or our customers or whoever our stakeholders are? Have we made room for them to share their views? Have we made room to listen to them and their voices? Because that's pretty much also what's coming through in the report, that listening to these respondents, listening to people is in the top, it's one of the top 3 trust building actions, listening. So if you want to be trusted, just ask yourself, in your strategy, do you have a channel where people can talk to you and give you feedback and ask you questions? Because that's another way you can build trust.
So what are some of the other trust building actions?
So this one, it came across strongly across all four institutions. In terms of business, they want business to listen to them. They want NGOs to listen to them, government to listen to them, and of course, media. And media to start telling stories and not to exaggerate, because there's a little bit of that coming through with the media. But let me quickly get for you those stats, if you just give me a second. So those top three, I'm going to get them for you. What are those top three findings? 1 second.
While you do, I should just say the exaggeration by the media is often overplayed, exaggerated, so to speak, just in defense of journalists out there.
No, of course. Like I said, all of this you take and decide what fits and what's applicable, because doesn't mean it's the gospel. This is what's said, so that it is. So you must put it and contextualize it. So of these, so one, in business, they want business to keep innovations affordable. Secondly, communicate pluses and minuses, so the pros and cons of this innovation, and hear our concerns and let us ask questions. When it comes to NGOs, they also say, so this doesn't come so strongly in NGOs because they're not necessarily linked as a real driver in innovation necessarily. So when we look at government high up on top, it's hear our concerns and let us ask questions. And media, hear our concerns, let us ask questions. So the other ones, it's really about communicating pluses and minuses. And also what's coming through is in the media is expected to investigate the innovations. So when something comes through, they're expecting media to do a little bit and tell us more is, can we trust this? But with really objective, an objective lens on looking at this innovation.
What does it say? What, in terms of what it says, what does it say businesses can do to make people trust them more, or they trust their brands more?
So, right, this was in light of innovation, so not brands holistically. So later on in the year, we're also gonna have trust barometer specifically on brands, which I think would be really right up your alley, which we would love to share with your audience, because then that would really speak to brands specifically. So here, this is really in regards to innovation. So in terms of business, that keep innovations affordable. That's what they expect you to do to build that trust, communicate pluses and minuses, and hear our concerns, and let us hear and ask questions. So those are the three things in regard to business within the framework of innovations.
What does communicate pluses and minuses mean?
It means tell us the pros and cons. Don't just say this is a fabulous innovation, it's going to change your life and whatever, and not tell me, but the downside is because then that's why people don't trust something. If they find out later that actually this has a side effect, this is potentially cancer causing, you know what I mean? Whatever the case is in that particular instance. So people want to know more and then make informed decisions.
Okay, and then it's very interesting that you have the top 3 trust building actions, because that's something that people could really use to help strengthen their strategies. Absolutely. What are some of the other highlights from the report that you'd like to mention?
I think we've really touched on a lot of things, but I think one of the things that come out is people are saying, to earn my acceptance, give me control over the impact of innovations. So people want to, to basically what people are saying is they don't want innovations happening to them. They want to be able to opt in. So when people feel like those respondents felt like people like themselves don't have control over how innovations affect their lives, So if they are given a little bit of options, they are much more likely to embrace compared to those who don't. So what we see there is that there's a sense of control, gives a much higher likelihood that people will embrace rather than reject each of the innovations. So people need to know that actually I do have a choice. How I can opt in or out of this particular innovation. They don't want to feel like it's been, pushed down their throats. You guess what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things. Mm-hmm.
If you have trust building actions, do you have trust destroying actions?
I think it will probably be the opposite of these. No, we don't have them specifically stated in the barometer. But I mean, I think if people saying listen to us, then the opposite would be true, that don't listen to us or speak over us and just tell us what you think we need without hearing us. And you will see the results yourself as an institution.
So what do you think the 2024 Trust Barometer, the South Africa report, tells us about our country?
Well, some of these things come as no surprise to any of us if we live in the country. The fact that government is the least trusted institution doesn't surprise any of us, because we know the state of affairs in our country and we know what's happening, and particularly this being an election year. So we know there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of uncertainty, because if you ask anybody, nobody can tell you right now which party is going to win the election. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So, and it doesn't come as a surprise that people feel business should therefore partner with government to enable some of these things, because at the end of the day, people want progress. They want the country to move forward, and they're highlighting, because they're seeing that business. When we think about last year, business came strongly in terms of competence. People trust that business can do what they say they will do, because they know they will hire the best people, the most qualified, etc., etc. It's really all on merit. So that's why there's a little bit more trust in that business to say they can do it. We've seen them do it. So now help our government to do what they need to do, because unfortunately, some of these responsibilities can't be delegated by government to business, because unfortunately it resides with them. But what can happen is that business can partner with them. NGOs also were quite trusted, but they're not necessarily seen as competent as business. But in terms of ethics, they will really seen as one of the most ethical institutions. So it's also a question of how do we reel them in, knowing their perception that society has over them, to say, how do we partner with all these institutions to actually move this country forward? So really, I think things are hanging in the balance when we're really looking at it. But there's an opportunity to really work together with these institutions and move these things forward. And actually working towards restoring trust in our country through innovation, and also in other sectors or other, areas of concern.
Busi, it looks like we have run out of time, but I'll tell you what I've picked up from this report is, if you team up business and NGOs, then those are the two most trusted institutions in the country communicating something, and you're likely to land a message which will resonate a lot more. And that sounds like an opportunity to me. We've had a lengthy conversation, but for the marketers out there, what would you say are the highlights or the most important thing that you want them to remember based on what we've discussed today?
Well, I think how I could summarize it is really knowing that we all know that we live in a time where society is absorbing immense technological and societal changes all at once. So we need to acknowledge what is happening right now. So we can't do anything in a vacuum. We need to consider the state of affairs in our country. So and this can mean progress for us, or it can create pushback. So the question we need to be asking is, how can we ensure trust that innovation brings the promise of a better future? So that's the question, because everybody wants a better future, a better tomorrow than they are today. So are we answering that question? How is what we're bringing them going to make their future better? Because some of the concerns people have really is about bread and butter issues. You know what I mean? They've got fears about their job security, their inflation, etc., etc. So how is what you are bringing going to help them with their future? How is it going to make it better? So if you can, look at your messaging and say, does it address that in any way? Because we need to talk to the heart of people and to what matters to people.
Thank you so much, Busi Roberts, the head of health at Edelman Africa, for your presentation of the 2024 Trust Barometer of Edelman, the South Africa Report, Innovation in Peril. Is it in peril? What we should do to get people to accept innovation rather than reject it. I think it's been informative. I certainly have a better idea of the most trusted institutions and why people feel the way that they do, or how the innovation or the trust in innovation is progressing, developing in our society. It's been insightful. We hope that you've gained some insights into how you could apply the outcomes of the Edelman report to your marketing strategies. Hopefully, they'll help you improve how you conduct your business, how you select the people that go into your campaigns, and help you create campaigns that land better, that do better, and that it affects your result in a much better way. Thank you, Busi, once again. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to the IMM Friday Flash Talk. We hope that you'll tune in again as we continue to bring you insights into strategies that are being used by marketers. We'll bring you people from across the marketing spectrum, even outside of it, that'll help you on your journey to becoming a better marketer, to improving your strategies. And also remember to share this conversation. Do join in on the conversation on the social media platforms. Tag your friends, fellow marketers, debate it at the water cooler while having some coffee. But for now, from myself, Govan Whittles, that's it. And thank you again for tuning in to the IMM Friday Flash Talk.